Good evening and welcome to the Broward Metropolitan Planning Organization's eTownHall. Let's talk transportation. I'm Jade Alexander, your moderator for tonight's event. Thank you so much for being here with us. Jobs and money. Everybody needs both of them, right? Tonight we have four wonderful folks who are going to give us some insight on how an efficient, improved, and affordable transportation system right here in Broward County can help our economy, which in turn, of course, helps you. You can also make a difference in the growth of our community. Speak Up Broward wants to know what's important to you. Do you think public transportation makes life easier for the growing number of employees, students, tourists that need an easy commute in an area that's as busy as ours? Speak Up Broward is an ongoing effort, and the comments and the suggestions that you give will help shape the future and, of course, the funding for a top-notch transportation system. And just to show you how much we appreciate your input, you're going to get a chance at winning a $500 prize by completing the survey that we've got over at the website, speakupbroward.org, but you've got to do that by October 24th. Now, let's introduce our panelists for tonight's event here. Joining us is Chris Wren, Executive Director of the Fort Lauderdale Downtown Development Authority. Hello there.
Hello. Hi, everyone. I'm Chris Wren. I've been building communities for over 35 years. Landscape architect, had my own design build company, been an urban designer in Virginia, planning director in Fort Lauderdale. In the last 12 years, I'm Executive Director for the Downtown Development Authority. Good evening.
Wow. Wonder if he does windows. Next is Todd Poole, President and Managing Principal of Forward Planning. Good evening.
Jane, good evening. Todd Poole, I have over 22 years of experience as a land use economist, about half of that in the public sector and the other half working as a consultant around the country. We've worked principally on redevelopment and transit-related projects, and I'm really excited to be here.
Well, thank you for joining us. Also, Sidney Calloway, partner at Schutz & Bowen. Thank you so much for taking your busy evening to be here with us.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Sidney Calloway. I'm a partner in a local law firm called Schutz & Bowen. I was on the Florida Transportation Commission for almost 9 years, chiefly dealing with the oversight of the Florida Department of Transportation. Also, I sat on and chaired the Greater Fort Lauderdale Chamber of Commerce and was part of their committee relating to transportation and infrastructure within the Broward County community.
Excellent. And rounding out our panel tonight is James Cromar, Director of Planning for the Broward MPO. Thank you for being here with us.
Good evening. I'm James Cromar. I'm very pleased to be here. I'm starting my 25th year of planning in both the public and private sector. And for the first 20 years of my career, I was able to get around with walking, bicycling, and transit, and did not own a car.
Oh, well, there you have it. All right, there's 3 ways that you can take part in tonight's discussion. If you'd like to participate in the live chat, go to speakupbroward.org. If you'd like to ask a question by phone, dial the toll-free number right there on your screen and press 0 at any time. Again, if you're on the phone, make sure you press 0 if you've got a question that you'd like to ask. You can also join us on Twitter by using the hashtag SpeakUpBroward. All right, let's get started because the chat has been going on for a little bit here. We have Maria on the online chat asking the following question, and whoever feels comfortable taking it, go for it. Since I moved here about 5 years ago, I've been hearing about a streetcar coming to Fort Lauderdale. What's the status?
I'll take that, Jade. The streetcar project was actually born out of my agency, the Downtown Development Authority, 12 years ago. We've been trying to bring this to the community for the last 12 years, and through the help of all the many, many partners, it looks like it's soon to be here. In fact, we anticipated opening in 2017.
Oh, well, there you have it. Sidney, businesses. What is the role that they play in improving and expanding the transportation system?
Businesses play a principal role in the system primarily by engaging both the public and the private sectors, providing a forum for asking the hard questions, really relating to what are our priorities in terms of the plans and the goals that we want to achieve as a community that will help bring more business to the county, help create opportunities for the existing businesses to grow, and to create an infrastructure by which all citizens, residents, and visitors can come and do business. The last thing that we really do, again, that I think is the ultimate price that we all pay is we come together and we talk about what is the cost for us to engage in these conversations as well as to put projects on the ground, and then ultimately, what is the cost if we do nothing at all? Most businesses community will understand and literally understand that doing nothing in today's society is not a good option. But there is a cost to doing nothing.
We have Bill from Fort Lauderdale on the online chat asking the following question. Why don't we make more use of our waterways for public transport? Which is an excellent question. I mean, we're on the water. Why don't we make more use of it, or how can we make more use of it?
So in the last few years, we have had a water taxi that operates around the Fort Lauderdale area, and it's extending down to Miami and also the Hollywood area, to the Miami Beach area. Currently, the Fort Lauderdale Downtown Transportation Management Association is looking at creating a new water shuttle that would ferry people back and forth from the north and the south sides of the New River through downtown Fort Lauderdale. It would be similar to the Sun Trolley that's operating in Fort Lauderdale now, where people could flag down the shuttle and get on at specific boarding locations at docks and ride it to different locations along the New River in downtown Fort Lauderdale. Currently, it's a little difficult to go over the bridges, and so this would give people options in how to get around.
Todd, you've worked all over the country and worked in communities where local, efficient public transportation was the star of the show, is what I like to call it. Can you give us a bullet point of benefits when everybody pulls together? You get the resources, you get the funding, you get the support from the people,
Right.
to having that local transportation, especially for Broward. I mean, let's face it, South Florida is appealing to people that want to live here, people that are being transferred here, people that vacation here. So obviously the transportation should be the star of our show.
Correct. Basically, when everybody pulls together, you're able to leverage much greater resources, not just public resources, of course, but private resources that you would not otherwise be able to avail yourself to. And so we're not talking about just transportation, but better transportation. Closer to housing, closer to amenities, services, getting you to open space. That's important. And again, when everybody pulls together, I think the everybody is public-private, that public-private partnership, and we like to refer to that as the PPP or 3 Ps. That's when you can optimally gain what is best about public transportation and ultimately help create jobs and improve quality of life.
Okay, if you're joining us by phone and you have a question that you would like to ask, please call that toll-free number and make sure that you press 0, and that's how you will be able to connect with us. Until 8 o'clock tonight, we're going to be hearing what you have to say and what questions you have about Broward's transportation future. Again, 3 ways to do that: via our live chat at speakupbroward.org, over the phone, call the toll-free number, press 0 if you want to get through to the panel, or through Twitter at #SpeakUpBroward. I've got here Lauren on the online chat. All Aboard Florida is one of our region's most important transportation initiatives. How is the MPO working with All Aboard Florida as it moves forward? Who wants to take that?
James is with MPO.
I'll start, and I think you all might want to add on to it also. But the interesting thing about All Aboard Florida is it's a private initiative. It's a private business that is putting up the money on the corridor that it owns, on the Florida East Coast corridor, to add rail service and to build stations in 3 different locations in South Florida, in downtown Miami, downtown Fort Lauderdale, and downtown West Palm Beach. And the idea is eventually to extend that service up to Orlando to provide a faster rail connection and give people options for how they want to move around. The Broward MPO is very interested in increasing the options for transportation and making more attractive options. And so while this is a private initiative, we have been aware of what All Aboard Florida is doing, are aware that there are ideas also for some future local rail commuter service on the Florida East Coast corridor, and All Aboard Florida can help pave the way for getting that rail service started in this region. But once again, they are private and are running on their own initiative.
Anybody want to add anything?
I'll just add one thing. Some of the other things that not only MPO, but a lot of the partners are doing are making sure the 4 stations, as James pointed out, have connections so that you just don't get dropped off there. Transportation is powerful when it's connected to things. So when you go to a station, you have connections. Hopefully there'll be premium transit options at those stations. In Fort Lauderdale, we're working on the Wave streetcar that will connect you eventually to the airport and the seaport. And I know Miami is working on that as West Palm, and I think Orlando's already started a premium connection to theirs.
That's a great segue to this next question, because obviously this has been an ongoing project. There's been focus groups. We have spoken out there to the public. You mentioned the Wave. The Wave is a streetcar project coming soon to downtown Fort Lauderdale. What do you say to folks who say the project is a train to nowhere?
They are wrong, and I'll tell you why. Because right now it does connect some of the major employment and activity centers. I understand where these people are coming from because they're talking on the bigger picture. And yeah, it isn't connected to the bigger picture, but if you look at how trains and transit are built in our country, it's too expensive and there's not enough money in Washington and other places for you to build an entire system. So you have to build a segment. And all these things have to start somewhere, and the best somewhere in Broward is our urban area. The MPO has a 2035 plan that shows how that will connect to all of our major areas, although some of the routes are sort of political, and that'll be vetted out with time. But it does connect to our two major areas within downtown. In that respect, it's a circulator. As it starts connecting to the rest of Broward County, it will now become some sort of premium transit service connecting more than what you see today.
I think what Chris is also saying is the way it is set up, it allows for future growth, connecting segments or connecting nodes where people are needing to be. So it will start off with a central location, but the opportunities for expanding that corridor to other areas of the county where, again, people and services and goods are needed is a major function. And so, again, it is a good opportunity and growth for the future.
All right, I believe we have Ann from Plantation on the phone with us. And Ann, you have a question about streetcars. Is that what it is?
Yeah, it was concerning the entire streetcar project. Why not just improve the public transportation system that's in place? And what are the costs associated with this Wave streetcar? I understand that you're trying to facilitate and improve transportation for the downtown area, but you have people who live in West Broward who would love to use public transportation but can't because it's not as efficient. Why not take those dollars that are going to be applied to the Wave, because there are a lot of costs associated with that. Are you going to have to buy new right-of-way for that? Or are you going to have to expand the lanes? And there are a lot of costs associated with that. I think we should try to fix what we already have before we try to mimic what's going on out west in San Francisco with respect to streetcars.
Anybody want to take that?
Well, I think her comment is well taken in a lot of respects. On one hand, the Wave is an important project within the Broward County community. At the same time, I think what the caller is expressing is that the need for public transportations and for connecting our western communities with our eastern communities through public transportation is an area that will not go away. It's an option that we absolutely need to improve. And so in Broward County, if we talk about our public transit, we've got to improve our systems with getting more buses moving east to west, thinking about other ways to move people from west to east and east to west beyond our buses. But the caller is expressing an option for that needs to be dealt with and needs to be part of any vision for Broward County's transportation.
Just as one sort of fact that people probably are unaware of is the Wave streetcar started with the Downtown Development Authority, which is basically a private agency. We represent the commercial property owners. The Wave streetcar is here because we have put up from private sector money over $6.5 million, which was at risk if it never happened, to get it here. Obviously, my agency is not going to try to go build something in Sunrise if our taxpayers are in downtown Fort Lauderdale. But I would agree with Sidney. I mean, it's important for us as we start in the Wave and you see all these projects get connected. We do need to look at that big picture. We do need to connect west to east and all of our major hubs. So that's the goal. You do have to start somewhere, and you always have people wondering, why did you start there versus over there?
And is another nugget to the goal of east to west also maybe making it, instead of the mindset of Monday through Friday, and a 7-day-a-week service? Because downtown Broward has a lot of functions and a lot of cool things that, the drive, the parking. you know, that becomes a mission.
Yes.
There's various things that need to be done. And one of the things we have to remember about transportation is that no one solution is a panacea for everything. We've got to do a lot of different things with our transportation system. Improving the east-west linkage is one of those.
And the Broward MPO, which the board is comprised of elected officials from all throughout Broward, and the board unanimously supported funding or giving some funding from the MPO to support the wave development. It was interesting that commissioners from Hollywood or Sunrise or Coral Springs wanted to see the wave because they saw that as the start of a system. And there already are plans and studies underway to see how it can extend to the west, possibly go to the airport, connect to Tri-Rail and out to the South Florida Education Center. And we see this as part of a start of a larger system that will facilitate transportation both east-west and in the high-activity centers.
We've got somebody out from the west on the phone. Jackie from Plantation, you have a question for our panel this evening?
Hi, yes. My name is Jackie, and I'm the sole caregiver of my mother. And the Plantation tram was our only transportation of getting to pharmacy, doctors, food, shopping. Can the county or the city help put some kind of bus line in to help us out? There's a lot of people that are not able to walk up to the mainline streets. And this is ridiculous. You know, we're the only city now in Florida. You know, Lauderdale, Sunrise, Davie, they have their little transportation, but ours was taken away, and it really wasn't given a good chance to fight for it. They started, you know, charging a fee what the customers didn't mind, but to strip it all away and just leave you with nothing, you know, and everybody can't afford or can basically walk up to the mainline streets and can afford the big buses all the time.
I'll just chime in real quick. I hear your problem, and I know Plantation did have a little shuttle that took people around, and it, for whatever reason, did go away. I can't speak specifically because I'm from Fort Lauderdale. I will tell you that's something that you need to get your citizens together and communicate to your elected officials and let them know these things are important. We've done that. Private sector or citizen-based initiatives will start working very positively with the other governments. We rose a project up, and then the MPO and others and everyone started helping us fund because they saw that we were serious, and we put you know our thoughts where we wanted to see the community go. That's really all I can offer you.
If I could throw in also, though, that the Broward MPO is currently in the process of updating our 20-year plan. And so we've recognized that we have a lot more needs in the community than we have funds to achieve. So we have to make some hard decisions about what goes first, what gets funded, and what doesn't. We've recognized the need for improved transit service, increasing transit service, different community circulators, and sometimes the funds aren't there. So one of the questions that may be coming up in the future is how do we look at getting more funding for these options? And improving the community shuttles is one way to very efficiently go and reach people where they are to get them to the trips that they need to be making.
This is also an area where the business community can be helpful because, again, the idea is we need to convene our community to discuss what are the priorities. And when you have that kind of opportunity for discussion, you do get a chance to hear folks like the callers who will come in and be able to help the community, help the business sector, help the public sector understand and make decisions about what are our priorities. Where do we want to spend tax dollars? Where do we want to spend resources? So it is an option. Again, I think it's very important.
And that's what tonight is all about. If you're just joining us, welcome to the discussion on the future of transportation right here in Broward County, where you are a valuable component to where and how this goes. 3 ways that you can ask a question. You can do it via our live chat at speakupbroward.org. You can do it over the phone. Feel free to call us. You call the toll-free number right there on your screen, but make sure you press 0. That's how you're going to get to the panelists. And you can also catch us through Twitter at #SpeakUpBroward. You know, when I go to visit Boston or New York or San Francisco, it isn't even a thought process for me. It's public transportation. I'm going to get on the train. I'm going to get on the bus. Do you feel that South Florida still has a need as far as the mindset, perhaps, for public transportation for folks here in Broward County? Is there still a ways to go as far as, we're obviously looking for ways to entice it, and you can have all the bells and whistles. Is there still perhaps maybe a degree of opening their minds and making them understand how pivotal and how vital, just for tourists. You have tourists that come from other countries that's all they do is public transportation. They don't want to rent a car. They don't want to have to pay parking. They don't want to have to look for parking. They don't want to deal with our traffic. Right. Is there a mindset that needs to be, I don't know, indoctrinated into folks so that all of you are looking at me like you all want to pipe in and say something, so feel free.
Jade, I'd like to take that one. I mean, this is the classic planning issue. The United States developed far differently than European countries, and really that's at the crux to this. You know, with the exception of the cities, you mentioned New York, Boston, obviously San Francisco, Chicago, those places were built by public transportation, or certainly were allowed to thrive because of public transportation, and not just on land, but obviously waterborne transportation. The rest of the country, the majority of the rest of the country, was really developed through the expansion of the interstate highway system in the 1950s under Eisenhower. And so as a country, we've been basically cultured to jump in our cars, a single person in a car using those resources and driving 30, 40, 50 minutes away to get to where we've got to go, as opposed to jumping on transit. Yes, there's a culture or mindset that needs to change. However, we also need to do a good job of educating why that change is important. Resources that are spent on traveling as opposed to, for food, for housing, for entertainment, right? Those are lost. Those are sunk into your car. What we're trying to show, certainly in the work that we do and on the work that we do on behalf of public agencies, is to demonstrate that a dollar not spent on your automobile could be a dollar that's put in the cash register on Main Street. Could be a dollar that goes to help pay your mortgage. I mean, this is an important point, and it's an economic issue. It's a bread and butter issue.
Anybody else want to?
Well, in fact, again, we're approaching a revolution of sorts in transportation, primarily because of the gas tax. And our national system of how we pay for transportation is based on a gas tax that cannot be sustained. And we probably, I think all of us here know that even in the last year, the Federal Transportation Trust Fund has been bankrupt. And they've had to put monies in it, and we're not going to be able to do that. And so how we fund transportation, I think the revolution is going to be looking for options and opportunities to move beyond our cars, getting ourselves on bicycles and scooters and water and public transit and using other available means to get around. And so we've got to come together as a community to talk about what is the next step for the next 20 or 30 years in terms of being able to move people and goods throughout this community that we cannot sustain by doing it the way that we've been doing it for the past 50 years. It's just not going to happen.
You just mentioned the multiple ways of transporting ourselves. A question from the online chat: what's being done to improve bicycle and pedestrian safety in Broward? Drivers and roadways, bicyclists, pedestrians, can't we all just get along? Doesn't seem to happen all the time.
No, I think Todd has put his finger on our culture is very dominant relative to our being in cars. And so part of what we'll have to develop, again, is a consciousness about sharing the space. The transportation corridors in most communities is very limited. And for us, it's no different here in South Florida. And so part of the culture change is how do we manage ourselves in a way that we can allow bikes and scooters to share the road with motor vehicles. And some communities are doing really fine job at getting some of that done. But again, it's a culture shift that we need to engage in.
And if I could throw in Florida, we have 4 of the worst cities in the nation for bicycle and pedestrian accidents and fatalities. And so at the state level, there's somebody who's now in charge of looking at how we can change that. Ultimately, our goal is to have 0 deaths for bicyclists and pedestrians, and it'll take some time to get there. The Broward MPO board has recognized that the roadways that we have can be used for more than just automobiles, that we need to be looking at how different types of users, transit, bicyclists, pedestrians, and others can use those roadways. And so we are targeting improvements to maybe narrow some lanes in a few places for the automobiles, still keep it safe for the cars, but provide space for bicyclists to safely move on those roadways. Putting in crosswalks and improving the pedestrian connections. There are times where I've seen where there aren't sidewalks and you see mothers or families with children in strollers in the street coming up to busy intersections. And so there's some places where we can address some of the safety gaps. It's going to be small efforts all around Broward, but in the next 5 years, Broward MPO is allocating about $100 million for bike and pedestrian improvements and some other complete street strategies.
Your questions and comments are very valuable and they're being noted, so please keep them coming. You can pipe in via our live chat at speakupbroward.org, over the phone by calling the toll-free number, and then you press 0. By pressing that 0, you connect right here with us. And you can also contact us through Twitter at #SpeakUpBroward. I'm hearing about all the improvements that we'd like to do and the expansions, and I've got an online chat question that says, what are other cities doing to improve their transport? They're in our shoes. What are they doing to improve the transportation and to change that cultural mindset that we're talking about?
So if I could start off and build, and then I'll pass it off to the others. But I've had the opportunity to travel around the country, and some of the others, we've seen different cities. And it's interesting to go and hear cities like Portland or Minneapolis or Denver that had relatively low rates of bicycling. And they started making investments in facilities that made it more inviting and safe for bicyclists and pedestrians to get around. They made investments in transit. And now those cities are held up as examples nationwide of what we could achieve if that's what we want to do for this region. So it's a question of taking some of the first steps. So Chris has talked about the wave, that's a first step, doing these different bicycle things. We have an overall map of how we'd like to see a bike and pedestrian network throughout the county, but it's small steps, one at a time.
If I could also tag on to that, the cities around the country, some of whom we've worked for, it's not just transit, it's transit that underpins economic development and quality of life. And so the cities that James mentioned, Minneapolis and Portland certainly, and Charlotte, these are places that made a conscious effort to improve transit, but to improve transit for the purpose of improving business, job opportunities, access to employment, access to where one lives, the ability to make transportation affordable, because owning a car, as we know, can be quite expensive, particularly if you don't have a good car and it's constantly breaking down. That's important, and the business person who owns the shop wants to know that their prospective patron has money in their pocket to spend in the cash or in the store, as opposed to always at the repair shop. So there are a lot of other issues beyond just the transportation. The transportation, in my opinion, it's kind of a pun, it is a means to an end, right? It helps everything else work.
I have an online chat question here. What do you think is Broward's greatest asset as it relates to the future of transportation?
I'll chime in. I think in the future of transportation, we've talked about All Aboard Florida, which is connecting Central Florida all the way down to Miami. We've talked about the Wave, which is going to connect to downtown All Aboard Florida. We have future connections planned to the airport and to the seaport. So when you start seeing that all of our major transportation systems, airport, seaport, and interstates, and now you have trains starting to connect all through Florida that with circulators getting the community around, I think is going to create a powerful brand. I also would agree with Todd that this is going to create a new place for these emerging businesses across our country, or maybe even the world, to say, wow, this community's got their act together. Let's start locating here, which will then help our tax base and other issues, which would hopefully help feed the system to all of our communities. I've had Congress people across this country come down here and visit and say, gosh, you guys are on the right track. With what you're doing, you can show the country how to fix urban sprawl. So I think all these things are happening. They happen slower than most of us want, but I think we're all on the right path. I think we're on the right path.
We have, we've got two students. We have Carlos on Twitter and Charles on live chat. Both are students asking if Tri-Rail service can be extended later for students who take those late classes. That's a great question.
It's an excellent question, and I think the answer certainly should be, without question, yes, it should be extended. And it should be extended not only to include the Tri-Rail operation itself, but also giving those students an opportunity to get off that train and be able to travel east-west. And so I'm also saying that not only should Tri-Rail be extended, but are needing to prepare and make sure that there's a bus or a east-west connector for students who are getting off at in West Palm Beach or down here in Broward to be able to travel east-west almost immediately so that they can get home if they need to get to the university or one of the colleges or to the downtown areas, that there's an opportunity to do that. And that's one of our weaker areas when it talks about students and getting them to and from home and to school and the places that they need to be at.
And if I could throw in, though, I agree that, yes, that is something that we should look at. There's a question of the funding, and again, we have a lot of needs throughout our community, and it's a question of being able to prioritize those and make funding available. One of the things that happens with transit operations is you can get money to build a system, and then there's another pot of money that needs to go to maintain it and operate that. And so that's an ongoing challenge for Broward County Transit, for Tri-Rail. It'll be probably an issue for all aboard Florida as they get started in the wave of making sure that there's the money to operate the system. And as you get more riders, you get more money in, and so it's a system that can feed on itself in a positive direction.
And Jade, again, I think what this brings us back to that question and where we are is that if we're not talking about how we're funding our needs, we're almost not having a discussion about transportation. And so we really do need the public to engage, their public officials, the business community to also engage and to have the conversation about priorities and how to get our priorities funded.
Which is why you are such a big part of this discussion that we're having and will continue to have as far as the future of transportation in Broward County. That's where you come in. 3 ways that you can ask your question, or perhaps you have a comment you'd like to make. You can contact us via our live chat. Just go to speakupbroward.org. You can find us there. You can also call us. We're taking calls tonight. Just call the toll-free number, and then you press 0. Just make sure that you press the 0 when you call the toll-free number so that it connects you to the phone line. And you can also contact us through Twitter at #SpeakUpBroward. Speaking of the phone, I believe we have Daryl on the phone. Hello, Daryl. What is your question this evening?
Yes, I'd like to know, why hasn't Broward County ever invested in elevated light rail system?
I can comment on that. As we just talked about the cost, elevated rail, which certainly could get you around and not have to compete with traffic and everything, is 4 to 5 times as expensive as regular in-street rail. We've already found it's very difficult to cobble together the money just to do something in the street. So one can imagine getting that extra money to go up in the air, like some of the Miami's people movers, and Disney has them, but it's extremely expensive to do that kind of transit.
Well, and the expansion and the improvements, it all boils down to money. It all boils down to funding. A question that keeps popping up, and it's an old question, James. I'm going to pose it to you. Wouldn't it be cheaper to provide cars to those who don't have them than to build and operate the additional transit that we are focusing on tonight?
It's a very interesting idea. Let's think about it. So if everybody gets a car, well, there might be some people that might not feel comfortable driving. Maybe you get to a certain age and you don't want to drive. So, well, maybe there could be some community circulators that could help move seniors around. And there are school children that don't drive. So either their parents would take them somewhere. There might be some different ways for them to get around. And then there are people I know that choose not to drive. And so one of my aunts that didn't drive, if she lived somewhere where she could walk to the store, she could get around. But if she lived somewhere where she had to drive, she would have to wait for somebody to do that for her. So there are different ways that people get around, and we're aware that there are different options. Just today I was going down to the Miami Beach Convention Center for a meeting, and it took 2 hours to come from Fort Lauderdale down to Miami Beach. While I was sitting in traffic thinking of 2 hours where I could be doing something else, I was wishing there was some way that I could have caught the express bus down to Miami or the Tri-Rail, something that would make that connection work better for me. So the idea of if we give everybody a car, we're still going to have some congestion issues and other side effects and the cost of maintenance and such. So it's something that could happen, but as a community, we probably need to decide where we want to make investments and how we want to make sure that we're moving people, doing investments that are good for our economy, that are good for our quality of life and our environment.
We have David on the online chat asking, what are the best options for medium-sized cities to finance wider sidewalks, bikeways, bike racks, bus shelters? which are necessary to support development around transit?
Again, another excellent question because it speaks to the need for futuristic visioning and planning around transportation. Too often, transportation did not consider land use planning or policies, or now, today, it should be part of, and generally it is part of the same conversation. So literally, when projects and land areas are developed, today's planning processes would bring both the transportation component and the land use component, which would require larger and wider sidewalks, more trees, opportunities for places for buses to pull in out of traffic. So the costs, I think, are minimal in terms of the overall impact and the productive impact that we will get by having those things done.
Jade, I'd like to speak to that question as well, because it does get into the realm of finance and public-private partnerships, which is a very important piece.
I'm glad you're bringing that up, and only because I want to tie it in with this question, because we definitely want to acknowledge folks that are interacting with all four of you this evening. We have that question here online. Should Broward explore potential public-private partnerships like we did with the 595 project?
Right. So an example of how wider sidewalks and bike lanes and more pedestrian-friendly amenities could take place is if you were working with a developer who's also looking at developing or redeveloping that piece of property. And obviously the public rights of way would be something that the public has to control. But the private developer entering into that partnership can make money available as part of the larger project, right? And under something like a tax increment financing arrangement, which has been done around the country, and certainly Florida has done its share of it as well, whereby the amenity or the public infrastructure is created, and then over time, the additional tax revenues that are generated from this new development help to pay the debt service for the infrastructure that gets created. That's one of the creative methods that medium-sized cities are using. It does involve a public-private partnership. Private sector has skin in the game. The public sector certainly has skin in the game, but no one party is doing the heavy lifting. And at the end of the day, it's a win-win situation, and particularly win-win for the public.
Chris, the businesses.
Yes.
What is their reaction? What's their feedback? Because we've heard about the wave and people's reaction. Businesses, what has been the feedback?
Yeah, and I just wanted to say one word to the last question. Yes, we should explore them more. Public-private partnerships are emerging all through our country, and they're proving very powerful ways of getting things and not having to wait years and years. The businesses in downtown are actually paying 16% of the cost of the wave. We did a lot of outreach. It was a very inclusive project, meaning that, hey, is this the right thing we should do? So on and so forth. We also, by the way, Broward County is a donor county in the state. We give a lot more taxes for transit than we get back. And Florida is a big donor state, and the federal government gives more of our money to other our states than us. So it's important we get all that back. I'm talking all this because that's how businessmen think. We want to make sure that what we're giving out, we're getting our fair share back, and our investment's going to equal something that we make a return. Quite frankly, the WAVE project has four main purposes. It's transit, it's economic development, quality of life, and it's environmentally safe or healthy for our community. The economic development part is why we push this project so hard, because we think all the money we invest, there should be a return. This year alone, the projects being built in downtown have spun off over $2 million to the city and $2 million to the county. We've talked to a lot of those in taxes. That's new money going into the city and the county. And as a businessman, that makes our community healthy, and we hope to get that money now reinvested back in our community. That's a political process. But in terms of what all of this means is we as business folks like that. We're putting our money where our mouth is. We're building something that other folks will then invest around. That then generates more money, and so on and so on. So I think that's how I would sort of answer your question, Miss Jade.
I think we have Sarah who can answer the question. I'm not sure if it's a question or a comment on how to get folks to use public transit. Sarah, is that your comment?
Yeah, I do. I was just wondering why it is you think that more people in Broward County don't use it and how that could be changed.
You didn't hear that? How can we, she's asking, how can we change? I think we've kind of covered that about the mindset. What do? Do we offer a free ride day in Broward County and give people a taste of, I probably should not have said that right here and now, but, I've lived in South Florida my whole life. I may have taken public transportation 3 times. Why? Because we have the mindset of you get your car, you get in your car, you got your routine, you do your deal. Would I prefer better access to public transportation as we get older? Absolutely. Last week we talked about how kids nowadays, it's no longer, oh, I want a car for my 18th birthday. They want whatever the latest gadget, tablet, laptop, fly me to the moon kind of thing. We did touch on the mindset, but again, how do we get the public more involved and more entrenched?
So one of the success stories that we have going on right now are the express bus services going between Miami and Broward. Both Broward County Transit and Miami-Dade Transit are operating those. Part of the key is finding out the routes and connections that make sense. So Broward County Transit worked with the Florida Department of Transportation to start an express bus service that went from the Miramar area and it goes down to the hospitals and the Civic Center in downtown Miami. It's been phenomenally successful. The ridership has been increasing by the month. That's something that is kind of a jackpot. And so it's a question of understanding where people are coming from and where they're going. It's attracting people that could drive to Miami, but they go and park their cars. There's Lexuses and Acuras and high-dollar cars in the parking lot, and it's people who by choice are taking transit because they don't want to have to deal with the congestion. So another part of this is creating a system that serves people all around the county, but then also connecting that service from where people are to where they want to go. Todd alluded to this also, though. Broward developed as more of a suburban community. We have the eastern parts of our county that might be a little more dense, but the western parts tend to be gated communities and wide roads and such. So it's a little difficult to serve those markets, and we have destinations that are all spread out. So that when we talk about transportation, we also then talk about where people live, where they're going, increasing density in certain locations, preserving the lower density in places where people want to maintain their single-family neighborhoods, and then creating a system that can respond to those needs.
And the key is providing a premium transportation choice. That means, again, people should not have to wait out in the sun or in the rain. They should have opportunities to have reliable service. If the bus is supposed to be there at 8:10 and I need to get to work, they ought to be able to know that the bus is going to be there. And so the reliability and the quality of the choice behind our public transit system is where we need remarkable or more improvement.
Your questions and comments, Sarah, by the way, thank you very much. Keep those questions coming. You can pipe in 3 ways. There's 3 ways that you can speak to any one of these very eloquent gentlemen. You can go to speakupbroward.org, pipe in there, call us. There's a toll-free number, and all you have to do is press 0. It connects you right here to us. Or you can contact us through Twitter at #SpeakUpBroward. Again, it's all about money. It's all about funding.
Yes.
You can't improve and you can't expand without dinero.
There is one way to sort of get that going too, and that's I've seen in other communities, and that's lead by example and get a project off the ground somewhere. Because what I've seen in many of the emerging cities that have premium transit or starting premium transit, which are trains generally, like streetcar, light rail, and what has happened is they started a segment somewhere and it grew a little bit. And then the rest of the community saw how sexy and cool it was. It wasn't just with the typical bus. There's nothing wrong with bus, but a bus serves a very limited market. And to get transit to work, you want to have as broad as market as possible. Those communities started 1 or 2 segments, got the rest of the community saying, we want one here, which creates political pressure, then creates all the politicians and policymakers to then say, well, we need to spend more money here. Our citizenry wants it. So one of the ways to get our citizens to do that is 1, educate them, we talked about that earlier, but also 2, saying, wow, look, one's over there in that part of the community, I want one over here in this part of the community. It's happened. Some of my counterparts across the country have said, Chris, you get that first segment built, you're going to have the rest of the county clamoring to say, we want that here and we want it soon.
Jay, there's also this issue, which is somewhat conceptual or abstract, opportunity cost, very much an economics term. It's what are the choices you're foregoing by not building transit, by not creating a much improved transit system. And the fact of the matter is there's a cost, and we talked, this was mentioned earlier, there's a cost of doing nothing. We refer to that as that cost. If you don't improve the transit system, are additional jobs foregone because now you can't access this particular employment center. For example, the airport doesn't have that type of system that could bring workers back and forth. And as we know, the airport is quite a large employer. You could say the same thing about the universities and the colleges. That's an employment center, and let's face it, the economy has changed dramatically, not just since the Great Crash, but it was happening regardless of that. It was just accelerated. The employment growth today is happening among principally within the service sector and principally among healthcare, education, and government. Those are three particular areas that absolutely need to have transit going back and forth, making it accessible, affordable, because a lot of these workers, while there are high-paid positions in those particular industries, as we know, there are a lot of low and middle-income workers that work for those types of institutions and organizations, and I'm sure they would greatly benefit not only themselves but the local economy if they had that affordable transit choice.
We've got a couple of great online chat questions here, and this person is choosing to remain anonymous, and when you hear the question, you'll see why. Would businesses offer higher salaries if Broward had better public transportation service? Do you think that would be an incentive for businesses to raise salaries? Not sure what one thing might have to do with the other, but...
Well, I do think that where you have a prosperous community that is growing, such as Broward County, which has a very strong and a emerging healthcare market, opportunities for salaries at all levels to grow, I think are part of the future. What hinders that future is our inability to have an infrastructure that will support business growth. And so we're talking about cost. One of the things I want to put on the table, when I say cost and when I say funding, I'm simply saying that Broward County has an opportunity to invest in its own transportation funding. We can rely on state funding, we can rely on federal funding. I do think, absolutely agree that we should have more public-private partnerships, but we ought to have our own transportation fund, not transit fund, transportation fund that will fund and give us the ability to advance a number of types of projects that have been on the table tonight, whether it's pedestrian areas, whether it's anything that we've been talking about in terms of transportation choices. Having our own fund allows us to have the conversations and to set our own priorities as opposed to waiting for projects that can only be funded through traditional systems of growth based on state and federal funding.
And we've only got a few minutes left here, so if you have a question or a comment, please remember, you can either go to speakupbroward.org and take part in our live chat there. You can call us toll-free. Call doesn't cost you anything, and then you press 0, and you get connected right here to us. We'll put you live on the air. And Twitter, just go to #SpeakUpBroward, and you can contact us there. This other question here, from Carlos, I love this question. Any plans for installing real-time bus status on shelters or mobile apps to help track and plan out trips?
Yes, the answer to that is yes. The county is actually working on that, and I think they have some, don't they, James?
Yes, there are some in place, and they're looking to get the technologies on the buses so that can track the movement of the vehicles in the next year or two, and then have facilities where you can see next bus coming 3 minutes.
Also, Deuce, to expand on that, the technology exists to where on your, if you have a computer at home, most of us do. I actually don't, but most of us do. that has real-time information about the transit systems in your community, and we would have those in Broward County buses. The Wave streetcar will have it, and downloadable apps for your phone. So when you see this technology that's coming out, it'll make transportation so much more easier to use than it is today.
We have Sarah online. Here's her question. Are there any local businesses that could be negatively impacted by the building of the Wave? And if so, how is it going to be addressed?
I guess negative impacts for the building during the construction period? Well, I think anytime we have construction anywhere, whether it's in downtown, which will have more businesses tightly packed than elsewhere, it'll have a negative impact. There's no way you can sugarcoat that. The last 5 years, it's an interesting question because it's a very important question, particularly to my agency, and we'll be helping with the outreach when it comes time. I've been going to other cities who've just gone through the construction process as like a best practices. What did they do right and what did they do wrong? And so I hope that we build the best system to have the least amount of impact. The Wave streetcar is the least impactful train system to build in our country. It only goes down 18 inches, and you can generally build a block a week, so that the impact is about a week or two, plus or minus. Sometimes it's more. If a utility rupture happens and things like that, it could be, really bad. We will be spending a lot of resources in advance of tearing up the road, way in advance, getting neighborhood and business groups together, finding out their needs, what delivery schedules they have, and other things to minimize it as much as possible.
We have Bob on our online chat. Mr. Cromar mentioned the Sun Trolley. Why not extend that service rather than building rail? That is the question.
So in other cities around the country that have put in the rail systems, it allows for those rubber tires, those buses or circulators, to extend the reach of those facilities. So instead of the circulator on the rubber tires having to travel this same route, they can provide connections to the rail, to the Wave route, or all aboard Florida, wherever it is, and then those buses, rather than following that route, can go back out to serve the community. So it's a way to increase the level of service along the route and also to the communities alongside it.
If I could just add one other question. We actually had 13 different routes and technology for the Wave, and we had rubber wheels part of the technology when we went out to the community to find out what did the community want. And we educated them on the pros and cons of all of them, and the community ended up saying, well, if we're going to contribute money, we want rail. And for the many reasons that we've talked about this evening and more if we had time.
We have Paula on the online chat. She's a girl after my own heart. She's about getting to business. When will I be able to sell my car, hop on transit, and be able to live, work, and play 100% without a car?
I would say she would have to move there now where there is that transit and she can live, work, play. I mean, that's, one of the key issues, and it goes back to this culture of change, or, let's change our culture, is to get transit built and more transit built where it needs to be. First, we have to get people to go to where there's already transit to demonstrate the demand. Most transportation and transit agencies around the country, particularly the larger ones, are strapped. And they're strapped because, let's think about it, most of our legislators probably don't take transit themselves, right? So they're, we're talking about trying to get people who have the power of the purse to fund a system, many of whom don't take advantage of themselves. So in order for that to happen, I think we really need to talk about getting more people to go where there is transit and show that demand such that it gets the legislature and the administration to say, hey, you know what, there's something here.
And Jade, if I could throw in also, one of the statistics that we look at nationwide is household spending on not only housing but also transportation. So typically around the country you'd want to spend maybe half your income on where you live and how you get around. But because of the high cost of transportation here and some of the higher cost of housing, typically in the South Florida area, we're spending 60 to 70% of our income on housing and transportation. And so we see an opportunity to provide a way for households to decrease their transportation costs, give them options and attractive options. So maybe instead of having two cars, they could have one, and some of that money could go for other things. So one option for the young lady who asked the question, it may behoove her to look at a place where there might be an apartment or a house that costs a little bit more, but if there's a chance to move around on transit, then she can save money in other ways. And it's a way of going back to the question earlier of is it higher income or is it how you can better spend the money that you do have coming into the household?
Right.
We have Julian on the phone who's got a question about bus shelters. Julian.
Hello.
Hi.
Hello, how you doing? Good evening.
Good evening.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
What is your question about bus shelters, Julian?
My question is, who decides or how is it decided on where the bus shelters / benches are set up at? Because I've seen them at places where, like, that are not necessary. And then there are places such as Young Circle where it should be one that is, more of a priority.
So Broward County Transit is the agency in Broward that is putting in the bus shelters, and they have a criteria of looking at stops where there's boardings of 25 or more people per day. And so they highlighted a number of those. There were, as they started their process, I think there were 500 shelters of the 5,000 stops in Broward, and they're looking to add to that number by over 1,000 more, and they're working toward next year to achieve that goal. So they had to figure out where do they start first, and they did start based on the number of riders. There are some benches that are located in certain places that may or may not be tied to the transit ridership. And yes, Young Circle is one that we're currently looking at because there are different spots to board the buses at Young Circle, and so there's a shelter in one location but not at the other. So we hope to be able to address that with the project that's going on within the next year.
Excellent. Thank you, James. Thank you, Todd. Thank you, Sidney. Thank you, Chris. I know you've got some plans after this show, but we thank you so much for joining us tonight. And thank you, all of you who joined us via our website, via our chat, via Twitter, via the phone. This is all about you. You take a big chunk of what happens here. Our chat lines are now closed, so if you were not able to get your comment or your question in tonight, we would still love to hear from you. Again, you can go to our website, speakupbroward.org, or call this number, 954-641-8141. That's 954-641-8141. And then you leave your question or your comment, your suggestion, your thoughts right there on the message line. Our next Let's Talk Transportation eTownHall event is happening 1 week from tonight, Thursday, October the 9th at 7 p.m. sharp. Please plan to be here with us, especially if you weren't able to, partake in this evening's discussion. You're more than welcome to join us next week. We're going to have 4 new panelists with more ideas and more information, and yet another chance for you to throw in your comments and questions and hopefully get them addressed right here and right now. Don't forget about our interactive online survey. It's your chance to win that $500 prize. Here's what you do. Visit speakupbroward.org. Everything you need to know is right there. On behalf of this entire panel, we thank you so much. Broward, up and coming, expanding, improving, on the map, the star of the show. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful evening.